this man, Rogelio Martinez, nicknamed Roger, he's been a Border Patrol officer since August 2013. So for 4 years, he's been a Border Patrol officer. He's a native of El Paso. But Rogelio Martinez was killed beside Interstate 70 near the town of Van Horn, which is 120 miles southeast of El Paso. Van Horn is also 30 miles away over rugged desert from the Mexican border. So Rogelio Martinez's body was found dead on November 18th, 2017. Actually, it was found on the side of a busy roadway in a large culvert, or near a large culvert. His body was found. It was taken to the hospital, and then several hours later, he was declared dead. Rogelio Martinez's head was caved in, which is a sign of blunt force trauma to the head. The autopsy report showed Rogelio Martinez had blunt injuries to his torso and his shoulder and ribs, according to KFDM-TV. The El Paso County Medical Examiner said Martinez had fractures to his skull, his jaw, his clavicle, ribs, and bleeding in his brain. She found brain hemorrhaging, but no other internal injuries. So bleeding in his brain, but no internal bleeding or injuries anywhere else. There's an interesting pattern to the deadly injuries. The blunt trauma all happened on the right side of Agent Martinez's body. The right part of his skull suffered a semicircular curricular fracture, which I don't even know. The side of his scalp had 2 cuts. His right upper jaw bone was broken. So he had 2 cuts on the right upper scalp. The right part of his skull had a semicurricular fracture. Then the upper jaw was broken. Going down his torso, see the right shoulder had a large wound, and the right collarbone was fractured, and then 6 ribs were broken. So a skull fracture, a fractured eye socket. I guess that's the curricular fracture. Multiple rib fractures. This is fractures, but it's broken. And a broken collarbone. So broken collarbone, broken ribs, fractured eye socket, scrapes on the top of his head, all just right here on the right. Another agent on the scene, Stephen Michael Garland. He was the second agent. Martinez was working by himself, but he called Garland out to the scene. Neither man was shot, but Stephen Garland was conscious, and he seems to have had very few injuries. Though he was discombobulated, he called dispatcher, and he had said that we ran into a culvert, or I ran into a culvert, and that's how it was written in the FBI report. So the reason why this is huge news, why this is national news, because November 18th, when this had happened, immediately our president, your Fuhrer, went ahead and said, look what's going on. Undocumented illegals clearly killing patrol officers at the southern border. We need to build a wall. So he attached this man's death with the necessity of building a wall. Ted Cruz of Texas tweeted that the incident was a stark reminder of the ongoing threat that an unsecure border poses. The FBI, however, says that there's no foul play. There's been no foul play. They have done extensive researches, hundreds of interviews. A total of 26 searches have been carried out in Texas and in New Mexico. The 37 FBI field offices have assisted in conducting interviews, pursuing leads, and those 37 separate field offices haven't come up with anything. They even interviewed 55 medical personnel who did stuff with the Martinez's body, who was around. A search warrant was filed unsealed in New Mexico. The agents were chasing the tip. that two undocumented brothers, suspected drug smugglers, had attacked the agents, but the FBI no longer believes the brothers. Overall, none of the more than 650 interviews completed, locations searched, or evidence collected and analyzed have produced evidence that would support the existence of a scuffle, altercation, or attack on November 18th, 2017. So there's no foul play, no evidence whatsoever of a scuffle, altercation, or an attack, which would go the contradicts, which is the total opposite. Even though they say they have ruled out foul play, they still have not conclusively determined how Roger Martinez and Stephen, whatever the guy's name was, Garland, ended up at the bottom of the culvert, and how no suspects have been linked to the incident. So they have no suspects. They haven't concluded anything. This is a preliminary report, but so far, no foul play. To me that there's only three options of what could have possibly happened. Perhaps they were attacked by illegal immigrants. The second guy doesn't remember anything, so if he was able to remember anything, but seems convenient, right? So that's a possibility. Perhaps it was an altercation between these two individuals, or maybe it was an accident. One of the sheriff said it was possible with the way that trucker trailer drivers sway with heavy winds, that a trucker trailer could have swayed over, and then the mirror hit the man's face and shoulder. So apparently it sounded like both of them. There's a lot of holes in this, okay? So but there's three choices. It's an accident, or it's an attack, or an altercation between the two. So either it's between the two, illegal, or accident. The Culberson County Sheriff Oscar Carrillo, Carrillo, was one of the first responders at the scene, and he thinks a semi-trailer may have hit Martinez and his partner accidentally. He says, "I'm the one out here emphasizing safety in the community, and you don't, if this was an assault, I would be out here being like, raising, so, but from what I know, that's not the case here." So according to the sheriff, Oscar Carrillo, he does not believe that it was an assault, that it was an attack. The FBI doesn't believe that it was an assault or an attack. They said that there's no evidence that an attack took place. What happened, they still don't know, but they at least are ruling out one of the three possibilities. It's either an accident, an attack, or an altercation between the two agents. Those are the three choices that it could be. But until you know something, I mean, why would Donald just run with something when he doesn't? National Border Patrol Council, which I don't know who that is. A National Border, it's just a group, just a private group or a citizens group. National Border Patrol Council. It sounds all, fancified and authoritative, right? It sounds official-ish. This is the Border Patrol, folks. This is actually the U.S. Customs and Border Protection. So when we say Border Patrol, that's who we mean, the U.S. Custom and Border Protection agents. So they just say National Border Patrol Council. So they seem pretty certain of themselves. They're the ones that have been pushing the narrative that they got pelted with rocks. They got stoned to death by undocumented illegal aliens, and that's Chris Cabrera is saying that's what happened. He was murdered. There's no way he was hit by a vehicle. They also endorsed Donald Trump, too. Just the facts, ma'am. I couldn't figure out the original scene. There's no pictures of the original scene, so they kept saying they found two bodies in a culvert, or one body and one was conscious. There was two reports. The second person was conscious, or the first one was that he was unconscious, and then the second one was that he was conscious. So you have two people, one's unconscious and dead, and the other one is alive and disoriented. The original scene, how the body is lying, how the body is laying, whether or not there was vehicles. I didn't even know if there was vehicles around. Were there two bodies and a car? Was there a truck around? The story that I'm going to eventually get to says that Roger gets out of his car. So at least his car was off to the side of the road. But is it possible that Stephen runs into him? I mean, if he wrecked into him, it just seems like that is crucial. That's key. All these media outlets, 11-page reports, and the first comment I want to make, the initial scene, the original scene, how were the bodies formed? How were they contorted? Did it look like the bodies were flipped over? Did it look like something, the semi-truck trailer had smashed into it and then they had been pushed off to the side? Or did it look like somebody was beating the crap out of them? The FBI will eventually tell the girlfriend, Angelica, that there was no evidence of any stones being thrown and hit. They were not stoned to death. So that makes the national, it makes Donald a liar, it makes Ted Cruz a liar, it makes the governor of Texas a liar, that Abbott guy. So no evidence whatsoever being pelted with stones. So not an attack, between the three, accident, attack, or altercation. So now it's just accident or altercation, right? Second agent, he should know something. I don't understand about his bout of memory. Is it devil's breath? I mean, there's that Colombian drug, devil's breath. It's dust. You just blow dust into somebody's face. They breathe it in, and it is such a powerful substance that people breathe in devil's breath, and they rob themselves. They find their own safety, their own money pot, and their own valuables and collectibles and furniture and whatever, and they help the person, the perpetrator, the predator who blew the devil's breath in their face, and they help them move all their stuff out. They pack their stuff in a truck and they get the hell out of Dodge. And then later on, the people who are inflicted with devil's breath remember everything that had happened. They remembered everything from the beginning all the way to the end, that they helped. They helped rob themselves, and they feel humiliated and ashamed because they are the ones that helped rob them. Other possibility, unless there's some other drug out there that I'm not for sure of that could knock you out and make you forget stuff, that's the Men in Black, but that seems to be science fiction. The other thing is amnesia. Maybe he got hit in the head so hard he just totally forgot everything with the FBI up his ass. He's cooperating with the FBI. It just seems like if he did know something, they'd be able to pull it out of him. How could he maintain? But he does seem suspicious. He does seem, suspicious to me. He should know something. So if he is suffering, hopefully he can dig deep and remember something. Or maybe he just is like Jeff Sessions and he just conveniently forgets, So the original story doesn't make much sense either, so I'm going to try to reconstruct it. But first, Roger's by himself. So Martinez is by himself checking these footsteps, and then he calls in Stephen gets the only clue that we know about what possibly happened if it was an accident. Stephen Garland says that he ran into a culvert. He called the Border Patrol dispatch. Stephen Garland had actually called his girlfriend first, and then the girlfriend was concerned and then called the dispatch. So perhaps he didn't even talk to the dispatch, but the dispatch report said that he had said something about him wrecking into the culvert. We wrecked into it. I wrecked into the culvert. So he wrecked into the culvert. So is that true? Does that mean they're in his car? There's a crashed car or truck or some kind at the initial scene? So I'm under the impression that Roger got there first, got out of his vehicle. He was walking around. So if he was walking around, how did we crash into the culvert? Where were they driving to? Why were they just, how the man was shot? So that's an interesting thing. If you're going to get attacked, if there was an altercation, why wouldn't you just shoot the person? But I guess that would make it clearly murder. Now it's like, is it an accident? Is it not an accident? But that's a fact. Neither man was shot. So you had Stephen Michael. I don't know why they call him Michael. He's a Stephen, but yet they have Michael in quotes as if that's the name they call Stephen. So why are they calling Stephen Michael when his name is Stephen? Just, I don't know if that is anything. Rogelio Martinez was called Roger. So Roger Martinez and Michael Garland were found injured in a culvert next to Interstate 10 about 12 miles east of Van Horn on 11:20 p.m. on Saturday, November 18th. So it's along Interstate 10. It's 10:20 p.m. Now, Roger is at night. He's patrolling. Interesting thing that it says dispatchers told Garland to get back into his vehicle and flick his emergency lights on so first responders could easily locate him. Buie, B-U-I-E. So that's what they said about Garland. So eventually he contacts Border Patrol. So he called his girlfriend, Garland does, or his wife. Stephen Garland calls his wife. The wife calls Border Patrol. Border Patrol eventually gets a hold of him, and then he's able to talk to them for something, say something. They only said to the effect either I ran into a culvert, I think I ran into one, we ran into one, they don't know. They think both of the agents ran into a culvert. So both of them, I thought he got out of the car, and then they were just walking around. So, you know, the media, every media outlet's picked up on this story, and none of them can answer these basic questions about how the initial. Before the incident late on a Saturday night, fellow agents said they heard Martinez radio in that he found signs of activity and was checking them out. So Roger Martinez is following footprints, tracks consistent with migrants or smugglers or just, you know, maybe as a deer or something. So he found footsteps. He found signs of activity. Perhaps there was a sensor went off, a triggered sensor. So there was, you know, responding to activity, a triggered sensor. So they have these sensors all out in the desert and around these culverts, and when they hear something, so it's weird. He's by himself. He's checking this out by himself. He radios it in. Hey, I'm checking this thing out. The autopsy report said he had brain hemorrhaging, fractures to the skull, eye socket, right ribs, and collarbone, as well as a contusion on his right shoulder. That would look like hit with a baseball bat in the face and right here. Is actually calling bullshit. Roger's girlfriend is calling bullshit on the FBI, saying that it wasn't an attack. But she says a lot of interesting things, which I'll get to in a second. So the one part of this story that I haven't mentioned is the butyl. There was a sedative found in the bloodstream of Roger, and they start asking the girlfriend the questions about this as if like maybe she drugged him. The barbiturate is found in drugs combined with aspirin, acetaminophen, caffeine, or codeine. And the FDA approves this, so it's just basically like an aspirin. It's a drug that you combine with aspirin and caffeine. But the girlfriend says he wouldn't even take an aspirin. So he was so anti-drug, he wouldn't even take. So it doesn't make any sense why he would have the. Quick to see if this butyl had something to do with devil's breath, because essentially it's saying that the butyl doesn't do anything. It just is a mood stabilizer, mood relaxer, pain medication that's usually added to other stuff. They have this one cocktail that says there's acetaminophen, butyl, caffeine, codeine. So you add it with codeine, you add it with caffeine. So it's more as a stabilizer. The pills are often considered secondary drugs. They act like a downer or stabilizer for those taking stimulants such as cocaine or methamphetamine. Street names for butyl or Fioricet include Yellow Jackets, Downers, Goofballs, Red Devils, or Double Trouble. Butyl is considered to have a small therapeutic to toxic window, meaning there's a fine line between a dosage that would lead to drowsiness or euphoria in one user or death in a cold. We call these date drugs. There's 37 date drugs, and they're the Carlson Company. They can find out what's going on. Molly, roofies, scopolamine. That's the devil's breath, scopolamine. So they call them date/control drugs. It's just worth mentioning that there's oxycodone. A lot of stuff I recognize: codeine, hydrocodone, oxycodone, Benadryl, Soma, Molly, angel dust. Hallucinogens. They have butyl, so barbiturates, butyl. They include it as a date-controlled drug. So they put it with Xanax, Klonopin, Valium, Restoril, Benadryl, Unisum, Flexeril, Mepro, Bamate, Robaxin, Dex. It says any of these drugs can cause time lapse, loss of memory, loss of self-control, compromised willpower, blackout periods, a feeling of helplessness, and many other similar symptoms. So the Yellow Jackets, that used to be over-the-counter, the barbiturate. Yellow Jacket was just sort of like, it was pep. It was sort of caffeine pills. So, I mean, it's maybe she just didn't know about it. Why would he have that in his blood system? That is, she's basically saying there's a cover-up going on. And okay, so the autopsy report, the drugs. Shortly before the incident late on a Saturday night, fellow agents said they heard Martinez radio in. He found activity, right? So there's this triggered sensor. He's on the case. He sees some footsteps. So he's going to get out of his vehicle. Roger Martinez is, and take a look around. He summons Stephen Garland to help him out. 38-year-old Martinez, 36-year-old Roger Martinez calls Stephen Garland, 38 years old. So he gets out of the car. He's out and about. He calls Stephen Garland. Now, sometime after he arrived at the 9-foot deep culvert, Garland called his wife, who alerted Border Patrol. So Roger Martinez is out and about, walking around, got out of his vehicle, calls Stephen Garland to come over. Now, we don't hear from Roger Martinez at all. So then Stephen Garland gets onto the scene, and immediately soon after he arrives, he calls his wife. So we should know what time he called his wife. They alerted Border Patrol, and then the Border Patrol said he sounded disoriented, unsure of his location. So the Border Patrol dispatcher spoke by phone with Stephen Garland, so eventually got a hold with him. He was disoriented, unsure of his location, and basically, I mean, if you use your imagination, it could be anything. Maybe they were joyriding. Maybe they were running around. Maybe they did something to each other. Maybe they did find, some criminal hiding out in the culverts. It just seems this whole thing is very peculiar. And also to just go with one thing, right? Nope, I know for a fact that it was illegal aliens who attacked. Is it possible they attacked each other? The other guy pretends he didn't, see anything. Is it possible it was an accident? A trucker trailer person had hit the right side of the person, so he's, they're coming down this way. He's walking to his vehicle. It slides over because of the thing, smacks him in the face, and then send him tumbling. Now, where's the other guy? The guy advised that he and Agent Martinez were both hurt. So he says, I ran into a culvert. I think I ran into a culvert. I'm hurt. Agent Martinez is apparently nobody goes to them for hours. So they called this thing. He's disoriented. We ran into a culvert. Someone come out to us. But I guess they don't know exactly where they're at. If they're on what interstate, what road. Hours later, cops find Roger Martinez, 36 years old, his head caved in and his body badly bruised. He didn't have injuries on his back or on his front. He doesn't have injuries on both sides of his body. They're all on the right side, and they're in line with each other. So that's what the medical examiner, there are no defensive injuries on the arms or hands. So not, hey, don't hit me. The absence of defensive injuries and a single plane of injury is more consistent with an accident than a homicide. So I wish the initial pictures were made public. Where's the vehicles? Where's the bodies? How are they lying? We give us the information. You're telling us the truth. Tell us 11:20 p.m. So this is at nighttime. Hours had gone by. Eventually, 11:20 p.m. They're found. They give them some, medical attention at the scene, and then they take Martinez to the hospital in El Paso, and he dies several hours later. So the authorities were alerted by Garland's wife, who called the Van Horn Border Patrol station, saying she received a cell phone call. Her husband seemed confused and disoriented. So that's how they were able to find him. They called him. They found him because it seemed like they actually wrote as if they talked to him specifically, and he said, we wrecked it to a culvert, and then he also said that they were both injured. Garland was injured but was conscious, was found nearby. Well, where's Stephen Garland? Oh, there he is. He's nearby. He's been injured. What kind of injuries? Not life-threatening. Sheriff Oscar Carrillo had made his initial comments about it being a tractor-trailer who, possibly smacked him when they were walking on the side of the road. He hasn't said anything to the media since. So the Culberson County Sheriff Oscar Carrillo, one of the first responders on the scene, said that there have been an increase in accidents on the heavily trafficked roadway, Interstate 10, with truck drivers swerving out of their lanes because of heavy wind drafts. And if you've ever been driving in these heavy winds, it's crazy. They can, push your vehicle all over the place. And you should pull over if it's blowing your vehicle everywhere. And it's like, oh my God, it might just flip my vehicle over. Angelica Ocheo, the Rogers girlfriend, said in her conversation with the FBI, she had asked if it was possible that he was attacked by rocks. I was told there was no evidence he was attacked by rocks. No evidence. The FBI says none. According to the girlfriend, Angelica Ochoa, so Angelica Ochoa, Ochoa, she didn't believe that cross-border criminals were involved, and she says that he was in the wrong place at the wrong time. Now, she also had said that it's all about the wall too, right? They're pushing for this wall, so they're trying to, but the FBI would actually be doing the opposite of that by saying that it wasn't a cross-border thing. They were actually, that would stop the wall from happening. And then there was also that one group, that National Border Patrol Council, they were saying, what, he just fell off? That's all they did, it fell off? Well, if you get hit with a tractor trailer, the mirror of a tractor trailer that's going 70 miles an hour, that would do it. So falling 9 feet down into some sand, no, that wouldn't do it at all with the extent of the man's injuries. And then what about Stephen Garland? What about his injuries? We don't even thing happens November 18th. November 22nd, Stephen Garland is released from the hospital, so that's 4 days later, and he's walking with a cane. So, he can barely walk, right? He is walking with a limp now. One of the colleagues with firsthand knowledge said that less than 2 weeks after the incident, Stephen Garland had no visible bruises or scarring. No bruises or scarring at all. So Stephen Garland had no visible bruises or scarring. So how bad was his injuries? His buddy just got his, face smashed in. And then here's Stephen Garland, Mr. Confused, I don't know any damn thing, doesn't have any injuries whatsoever. So this leads to Angelica saying he knows something. Stephen Michael Garland. Stephen is his legal name. Michael is his adopted nickname. But you got Stephen. You already have a first name. Why? A number of possibilities that could happen, right? Accident, it's either an accident or it's an attack or it's an altercation between the two. So it's possible Roger Martinez is walking out and about, looking for this, looking for that. Stephen Michael Garland, let's say they went there, they were hanging out and they're doing a bunch of drugs. They started joyriding. One thing led to the next. And then he didn't like his mouth and he just beat the crap out of him. And he's like, oh my God, how am I going to get, away with this? They got to, I don't know. We were injured. We were beat up. I have no idea how this had happened. So the girlfriend thinks it's a cover-up. The reason because of the drug. They found this butyrbital in his system. A sedative was found in his bloodstream. So clearly that must be something. But she's like, no, they're focusing on him too much. They're not going after the real killers. They're not even focused on the other guy. Stephen Garland, he's not even being asked what had happened. So, and he forgets everything. Make him take anything. You can't make him take anything. He wouldn't take ibuprofen or aspirin. So what does that mean? Perhaps he's taking it and she didn't know about it, but if he's that, that big of a tightwad that he wouldn't even take ibuprofen or aspirin, so he's very pure, very organic, so then he wouldn't be taking any of these barbiturates, that butyrbital. He would have been taking butyrbital if, he's against this ibuprofen and aspirin. So what is going on? Roger wouldn't even you can't make him take anything. So she thinks that the FBI focused on the medication instead of finding the person who killed him. So it just alarms her. It's like, oh my God, find the killer. Find the person who actually did this thing. So Stephen Michael Garland was found conscious at the scene, but has no recollection. He was found nearby when they eventually found him hours later after the incident. So anything could have happened, and he just... Martinez's partner, the other Border Patrol officer number 2, whose name was not immediately released, Stephen Michael. Hey, Stephen, why is everybody calling you Michael? Hey, Michael, why is everybody calling you Stephen? So he survived his wounds. He said, we ran into a culvert, I ran into a culvert. We don't hear about Roger whatsoever. So is it possible that he did something to him? I think it's possible. Is it possible that an immigrant had attacked him? I think that's possible too. Is it possible that it's an accident? I think that's possible also. They said that it doesn't look like a fight, so it doesn't look like there was actual, specific fighting altercation, so that would lead to an accident. And that's the same thing that the medical examiner had said. And then Garland had been cooperating with the FBI during his healing process. So how much could he lie? If he's cooperating with them, seems like perhaps it's not him.